Welcome back and good morning, good afternoon, might even be evening where you are. That's the great thing about these virtual events is that we are not tied to time zones. I'm Eric Schumacher Rasmussen. I'm the editor and VP of Streaming Media Magazine and the website, and I'm the conference chair for this and all streaming media conferences. Welcome to our third Streaming Media Connect virtual event. We've had a great week of presentations and panels on everything from very technical topics like quality of service and encoding and transcoding and ATSC 3.0 to bigger picture business and strategy focused topics like free ad-supported television, live streaming, sports streaming, and this is going to be a great way to wrap things up and sort of bring everything together and talk about what OTT might look like in 2025 from both a business and strategy and content standpoint and also from a technology standpoint. And we've got representatives from all those worlds on the discussion today. Come back next week if you're interested in some deep dive workshops. We've got workshops from our editors, Jan Ozer, Sean Lamb, and Robert Reinhardt, as well as some leading industry technology vendors. Check out the website and register for those. I think you'll find them more than worthwhile. Before we jump into the discussion, I would like to thank Steve Nathans-Kelly, who has been behind the board, so to speak, all week long, making things run smoothly on Zoom, answering questions in chat, sending out messages. So Steve, thanks again for doing such a bang up job. And I'd also like to thank Limelight Networks for being the diamond sponsor of Streaming Media Connect, all the sessions this week. I'd also like to thank our sponsor for this session, BitMovin. Thank you for helping us make this all possible. As I said, our panelists are going to talk about what OTT might look like in 2025. Before we started the webinar, our moderator, Alan McLennan, pointed out 2025 is a long time away. So perhaps putting that date in the title of the session was a bit optimistic or a bit overreaching, but we're going to spend the next hour looking at which business models are going to dominate, which technologies will be driving the industry, what role things like ATSC and 3.0 and 5G might play. And with that, I'm going to let Alan take it over because I don't want to take up any more time. Welcome to my good friend, Alan McLennan, out there in San Francisco.
I guess I had control of that. Thanks, Eric. This is fantastic. You know, watching that video kind of got pumped up there a little bit. You know, yeah, we're kind of passionate about everything. You know, and if there was ever a time over the last 11 months of being earth-shaking, we just went through it, and that's the point of what we're going to be talking about a little bit today. Hats off to Limelight and their marketing group for picking a really great song that can get things moving along those lines. Today, I'm really fortunate enough. I'm Alan McLennan with the Pata Media Group out in San Francisco. I know probably many of you on the line right now, and I look forward to kind of having an open discussion with our group here today. And those are Grant Mickelson, Disney Plus, Paul Pasteur from Strom and First Light, Bonnie Cumley, founder of Broadband HD, Shabana Radhakrishna, who is the head of Google TV, and Reinhard Grandi from BitMovin, who is the sponsor of this panel. What I'd like to ask all of you for the benefit of our audience is just take a moment and give us a little bit of background, but also what you feel is your insight briefly about this discussion of where we're going over the next 2 to 3 years that will have impact on the next 5. Grant, could you kick us off with that?
Sure. Thanks for having me again. It's great to be here. Hello to everybody out there. A couple people have tuned in. So I'm Grant Michelson. I am in business affairs at what is now called Disney branded television, used to be Disney channels. It includes the Disney channels like Disney Junior, Disney Channel, Disney XD, as well as supplying content to Disney Plus. And boy, do I wish I have the answers to what OTT is going to look like in even 6 months. I have a sense that, the really, really big players are going to have maybe different challenges than some of the up and coming players who are carving out places for themselves. Overall, I think it's a matter of presenting a value to the customer who sees more in what they get from what they're paying. And the way to do that is with all of the things that everybody on this panel and everybody watching bring to the table. And that's the content and the delivery and the connection to the audience and the integration with other media and social media and how other places and the way that people are becoming more mobile are now going to refine how they get their content on as they move about their day. There's so many different ways that we're going to see this evolution happen. I think in the near future, it's going to be fantastic to watch, and I'm going to get my popcorn.
Well, I think that, that's a tremendous answer. In fact, it's probably the answer of what we're going to be looking at going forward. But let's look at a little bit of background and conversation. Thanks. Thanks, Grant. Bonnie, could you bring us up to date on yourself and Broadband HD?
Yes, well, Broadway HD is a subscription. It's okay. It's a subscription streaming service that focuses entirely on full-length theater. And as we all know, the entire landscape of live entertainment went down just about a year ago. And Broadway HD is really one of the only standing, full-running entities that is serving the Broadway fan. So we're in a very unusual industry that, we were first to market with full-length stage plays and musicals. And so in addition to being a streaming service, we're also a member of the Broadway League, which is the trade association for the Broadway producers, presenters, theater owners, and general managers. And so our obligation, our duty, what's baked into our DNA is actually to be a support service and support industry, for the Broadway League and the Broadway League members and the live theater and live, entertainment around the world. So, we're really, devastated right now. One of our biggest challenges has always been, where are we going to get content? And now with the live entertainment business just being out for the count, everybody's just got to be much more creative in how they find content, how they create content. But we were looking at that before the pandemic, because Broadway is such a small ecosystem. We have 41 theaters in Times Square, which is where all these shows originate. But the turnover is 30 shows a year in a traditional, normal, pre-COVID time. So it's, an industry that got wiped out, but we're trying to keep the fans engaged 24/7 with our content. So that's, that's a special part,
Sure.
a special, honor that we have, privilege that we have that I think is sort of unique to this that you have today. And like everybody else, the future is, who knows where we're going, who knows what the technology is going to be, but as a small niche service, a niche service is not, it's sort of like comparing a startup to a legacy business. A startup is not a mini legacy business. It's its own, that you have to constantly, experiment and iterate. And is this working? And is this what you're, is there a market for this constantly? And so Broadway HD just celebrated our 5th anniversary back in October. So there is a market for our content, and the theater fans are just self-identified, and they are huge fans and a very sticky demographic, so they spread the word for us. And as far as the technology, we look to the bigger players to innovate and see what's working, and we're very much demand driven. So
Sure.
our subscribers tell us what they're looking for. So that's Broadway HD.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And I'm sure the theatrical community in and of itself is incredibly appreciative at this time because of the shutdown that's currently going on. Let's jump right to Reinhard, whose company is sponsoring this panel. Reinhard, give us a little bit of idea of BitMovin. And since you're the head of product, what is BitMovin, and where do you feel your background is being complemented to where we're looking at going from here on out?
Sure thing. First of all, thanks very much for having me, and thanks for the invitation. So my name is Reinhard, and I'm with BitMovin since the beginning of the company, actually. And for those of you who don't know BitMovin yet, we power some of the world's largest OTT video providers with video developer tools. So we are a product company, we are a technology company, and with our encoding, with our player, and with our analytics product, we really committed to redefining the viewer experience for our clients. And I have to admit, I'm also coming with a technology background. So my view might be a little bit biased in technology, but I really think looking at the next years, looking what's going on at the moment in the space, the technology is really one of the driving and forcing function. And I really predict that this trend is going to continue. And Bitmovin recently also won the Emmy Award for technology. So I think that shows that we are doing something right, that we are betting on the right horses. And I can only foresee a future in OTT and video streaming where technology gets even more and more important, and it to a certain extent will be a battle of technology.
Well, certainly technology connects the viewers and the carriers, and as well as the providers. So there's no question about that. And distribution is key. We're going to get to that. Shobana with Google, tell us a little bit about what your role is, where you're going, and what a little bit about Google. We're going to get into more in-depth activities as we come for the next 45 minutes once we start. So Shobana.
Sure. First of all, thanks for having me. And Alan, I should commend you on not just attempting, but pronouncing my last name correctly. So thank you for doing that. You're brave. I am responsible for building the Google TV product. As some of you may know, Google TV launched with Chromecast back in September 2020. And so far, we are seeing very positive user reception, which we are happy to see. We also at CES earlier this year announced bringing Google TV to Sony and TCL devices, which also we're excited about. So with Google TV, or in general Google, what we try to do, we actually have really a nice partnership with Disney Plus as well, and many of our apps. What we try to do is bring the best of the content in a personalized way to the users who want to access it, and bring it without a lot of friction. I think many of us can think about the Friday evening experience where you're spending maybe 20-30 minutes looking for content, finding something to watch with family, and then sometimes we find it after a long time, sometimes we just give up and decide to do something else. And we just want to make it easier for users to get to content they want to watch. So when I was listening to Bonnie, for example, if I'm a theater fan and if that is the kind of content I consume or I want to consume, our goal is as a platform, how do we bring the content from our partners as close to their users as easily as possible? So that's what we are hoping we can help the ecosystem with. But we are always continuing to innovate, continuing to take feedback and look at what users want, what our partners want, and constantly iterating our approaches. In terms of, I think, looking ahead for 2025, I agree with what many people said. It's far out there to completely predict.
Sure.
I'm here to share some thoughts as much as to learn how people think it will turn out over the next several years. But we do see during our 11 months in COVID, as well as in general, that in addition to the traditional media, there is interest for live TV or even fitness apps and fitness from the living room, using your TV, using the equipment. Can I do more fitness, or can I do more social workouts with my friends while I'm at home? While some of this was introduced probably because all of us are mostly at home, we're always interested in continuing to observe how much of this behavior stays beyond this, because people actually find the new normal to be more comfortable, and some behaviors may just continue, and we want to best support that kind of social interaction from the comfort of your living room as well. And the other thing I also say is TV as a device or media in general, how does it form a part of the end-to-end device ecosystem? For example, from the comfort of the living room, do I want to control other devices in my kid's bedroom so it's flexible for me as a parent? Or do I want to bring in some integration with security cameras so I can change settings or perform actions without having to step out from the comfort? So that's another area that we are very excited about the evolution over the next several years as well.
You know, your point is well taken about the flexibility of the platform and what you're providing for, you know, who and anyone that wants to access content, which is really, you know, very timely in this discussion, because Paul, being a founder as well as with Stroom and First Light, is looking at providing that kind of platform and capability. First Light's platform, Stroom's content, and you know, all the elements that we're talking about here kind of cue you up there, Paul. Paul, give us a little bit about, we've known, all of us have known each other for some time, but Paul, give a little bit of background of yourself and then you know, a thumbnail about Stroom and about First Light, and let's go from there.
Sure. Well, thank you for the introduction, and it's great to be part of this great panel. And Bonnie, I am one of your enthusiasts that also goes out and talks about your service. So a pleasure to be on the panel with you. So by way of introduction, I'm a co-founder of Stroom, the most recently announced platform that's looking to drive aggregation in the OTT space, which I'll get into a second, as well as co-founder for First Light. I come to this by way of background of running strategy for Disney ABC Television Group, being a part of the original launch service with working with Grant, actually on Hulu back in the day, back in 2009 when we did our original deals. And the 6 years I was a part of Disney family after that, working on research, data analytics, and media planning. And then more recently across a COO across Discovery, Science, and Planet and Velocity channels. But you set up a very big question, Alan, and I want to kind of, you know, I think that what I love about the way you teed it up is it's almost our hypothesis is, what does the 2025 look like, and how can somebody like Stroom and First Light play a role in shaping that? So if I look at the current landscape of the universe and I think about the unbelievable explosion we're seeing in the AVOD and SVOD markets, right? And any forecast that from 2019 is going to, you know, looks anemic in the rear view mirror of COVID and where we're at. But what we also see at this moment is that the big three players, especially in the SVOD space, which I'm going to focus on, really take a huge line share of the market, right? Nearly 65 to 70% on a global basis, excluding markets like China. And if we look at the US market, those big three, coupled with HBO Max and Hulu, take nearly 75% of the total market. But that's juxtapositioned against a marketplace where Parks and Associates was saying that there's nearly 300 available services to consumers at this moment in the US alone. Mm-hmm. And so this aggregation is, I think, underserving both content providers and consumers in many respects, right? The first on the provider side, right? These passion verticals play an unbelievably important role to their consumer bases, but there are so many light and occasionals and secondary and tertiary audiences that can need to be reached in an efficient manner to help drive both the economics and the opportunity for these services that we hope to play a role in. But also on the consumer side, we may be sitting across this panel can name 10 or 15 services that we're very aware of, but most consumers don't know them. And importantly, don't know the value proposition that sits behind them. What content is driving that service? And so, and importantly, we also hear from consumers all the time, I want a better way to manage my subscriptions. I want to find a way to actually not have my credit card all across the internet. And so what we're looking to do with Stroom is help provide an environment for those next level of services sitting out the big three or big five, provide an environment where consumers can seamlessly discover and consume that through our credit-based model, but also find an environment where they can manage their services and hopefully win the habit. Television habits are some of the most important things that happen. The old school way used to be about scheduling, right? Thursday nights were owned by NBC and Sunday nights were owned at 10 o'clock by HBO Max. But those habits have changed today, and it's a lot of, I first start with Netflix, and then I go to Amazon, and probably go to Disney Plus if I'm kids and family, or maybe HBO Max if I'm urban sophisticate, and then I'm dumped in this wide ocean. And that doesn't have that habit formation, that ritual formation that's so critical to winning the attention, the engagement game. And so what we're looking to do is by re-aggregating those services to build that habit, build that formation, drive the economic opportunity for our partners. And, you know, pivoting for a second there on First Light is looking to help scale those data, tech, and product opportunities against these services so that they can fundamentally be in a better position to compete. And so that's the operating hypothesis of bringing these two ventures together.
You know, you really raise a good point. Everybody kind of really nails it to this degree, and that is, you know, we kind of alluded to the fact of the last 11 months, and Paul, you just mentioned it, the acceleration of behavioral modification in the last 11 months really kind of maps with the last 11 years. So now we have seen this kind of embracing of this new type of delivery mechanism and new types of content creation for these audience. You know, we're at a good point. Like you started to mention about, you know, forecasting. You know, 2019. Well, you know, we've already hit 2023's numbers, and those numbers, you know, what now? And so we're starting to see that we have done it for classic marketing and classic product deployment. We have established a market head, and that beachhead is something that will now start growing, and being able to serve up different forms of content of interest for audiences really plays well with Bonnie, with Broadway HD, as well as the super aggregator such as Disney Plus, and also the key platforms that Savannah is really working towards with Google, and of course the affiliated kinds of content that Google has access to and algorithms to serve that content up over the platform via YouTube TV. But getting it all there is something that I'm really wanting us to talk about today, because the market's primed, no pun intended. The market is ready. The market is accepting. The broadcasters are scrambling because now they're looking at developing new types of relationships to empower their ad departments to sell ads for their AVOD service partnerships. We're seeing this ability at this time to try to capitalize on this established base and the established audience that's out there. But getting the content to these audiences is become more critical. The distribution platforms, I just want to step into that a little bit with the efficiencies of these kinds of devices is really where, Reinhardt, you're looking at, and I want us to use that as a foundation to be able to connect these audiences up with this base foundation. Tell us a little bit about what you're discovering.
Sure, I fully agree. So independently of the service you're looking at, doesn't even have to be the big names. Even if you want to stream your fitness classes, you're confronted with a lot of challenges these days. So one thing that I think is a key one is the quality of experience that you can deliver to your viewers. And if I remember 20 years ago, I was looking at my first video on the internet, and I really didn't care if the pixels have been that size, or if I had to wait till it loaded for 10 minutes and then I watched 10 seconds. But these days are definitely over. So the expectations from viewers are higher than ever, and they are more and more demanding. So we see it with announcements of 8K streams, of HDR, of more and more quality related features. And to really drive that quality, you have to be on the forefront of technology. And as mentioned in the beginning, it's independently if you run a video streaming service serving to millions or to thousands, those are the expectations that the industry has set, and the industry is still setting, and those are increasing. And I think I can also second what Grant mentioned in the beginning about devices and the device landscape being a challenge. Of course, yes, I also own, I don't know, 10 devices, smart TVs, mobiles, whatsoever. And yes, I want to watch on each and every device, and I want to get the very same quality, the very same viewer experience. And I think those services which that will be able to provide that, and that will be able to fulfill that promise, are those services we are going to see in 2023 or even beyond that.
Yeah, but you're mentioning about services versus devices, you know, and it just prompts me to ask Bonnie, because you're presenting a live theatrical event, be it that it's recorded for your audience. You know, you may not know this, but you just might. I would have to think if it was myself at home, I'd be wanting to watch it on the biggest screen that I have in my home to be able to have that kind of involvement that I would hopefully have if I was in an audience. Is that your primary display? Is the television, or are you finding also the headphones to the mobile devices to the PCs? Or tell us a little bit about that, because just what Reinhard said, you know, they want to be able to provide it across all the different devices, but that also means where does the audience watch a live event? And we're going to get to ESPN and sports in a second, Grant. But when it comes to a theatrical event, what do you have? Is it all on large televisions?
What we're finding is most people want to watch on their large screens. And you know, that I think is the best viewing experience. But the reality is that Broadway is a luxury brand that's recognized around the world. You know, you mentioned how many, you know, countries we have. Not all those countries have the actual live tours, but the brand name carries globally. So I can go anywhere in the world and tell somebody I work in Broadway and they're like, oh my God, that's amazing. I love Broadway. And then you say, well, what was the last show you saw? And they say, I've never been to a Broadway show. You know, so we already had that power of that brand out there. So now when we're bringing the theatrical experience to them, they don't care what they're watching on, you know, and more people around the world have cell phones than have indoor plumbing. And that is increasing, you know, so and they don't care. So they're signing up on mobile, and the ones, you know, that were the traditional Broadway ticket buyer, which is an over 40, you know, white woman with higher disposable income and education, they want to watch on their TV. But here's the interesting part is that they didn't always know how to deal with the technology. So they're saying, you know, oh, you know, www.broadwayhd.com. Okay, so that's on my computer, you know, so they're thinking they have to watch on their computer. And then when you say, well, no, you could actually watch on a smart TV. Well, I don't think my TV is that smart, you know, so, you know, it's actually, you know, educating the audience that is a little bit older with that, you know, that technology. But here's the thing that happened in COVID is that you have all these families that were together. So the grandparents, the parents, you know, talking about your habits, we've all of those people that were older are now, they can email, they can text, they like got a, you know, a 12-month run on, you know, a technology lesson here that they didn't have before. So the answer is that they sign up on mobile. Around the world, they watch on mobile, but the US, UK, Germany, and, you know, Australia, New Zealand are going to big screen TVs.
So developed nations really kind of migrate towards the larger screen. Underdeveloped nations are to the mobile device because it's an individual choice on that.
Which mirrors the tours, the actual tours. When the tours went out live, those were the countries that they went to. You know, there's all these, you know, there's probably 40, if it's a big recognizable brand musical, it goes to about 40 countries. Sometimes, you know, like those big Andrew Lloyd Webber shows, can, you know, Phantom of the Opera, Cats, those guys can go all over the world. But a lot of the other shows people have never heard of, they don't connect, you know, there's just nothing there resonates. So yeah, so it's it has to be recognizable. And so it mirrors the ones that where the tours went are the ones that are, you know, go right to their smart TVs.
Well, you know, we experienced that with Disney pulling together and presenting Hamilton, but also Disney is also known for providing tremendous content across the board. You know, Paul was mentioning about Hulu, and Kevin and a few others that were, you know, working towards that kind of activity for that distribution point. Now that Disney is a super aggregator, and you're looking at not only the Disney content, but the Hulu content for local, but also sports. Are you finding that, you know, is this kind of the inverse model for sports? Is most of the viewing consumption happening on mobile? Or are you also, like, I'm sure big games and things that people are watching it on television, but are devices becoming just kind of agnostic? It doesn't really matter? Or are you focusing on this when it comes to Disney?
So first of all, I'm speaking of my own opinion and not on behalf of the Walt Disney Company, as Paul well knows, has had to say many, many times.
That disclaimer travels with you everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Right. So, I am not as close to the ESPN side. What I do see is that sports really, got hit hard. And when it resumes, I think overall interest will also catch up with it. And people will want to follow along wherever they are with that sport, and ESPN will be highly interested in bringing that to consumers globally. And that's, I think, also, from a content perspective, what Disney Plus is aiming to do. Yes, it is, I guess you could call it a super aggregator, and it is differentiated into more of the family demographic and target. However, they're also looking on a global basis to distribute content to screens of all sizes, because in many different families there are people who come to the service from wherever they are, and you want to meet them where they are. So if you want to make the best possible experience you can on whatever device they have. So for families that have multiple small devices, so that each child, each member can reach it in their own space, or maybe even in a shared space with headphones, will be there. And I'm not seeing any specific strategic effort from, like, for example, the content side to develop something that is targeted towards one screen or another, as much as it is targeted to being a great story.
Alan, I want to build off of what Grant was saying just for a second, just more from the First Light side than the stream side here, is what I think is fascinating about sports at this moment is that they're really going to be driving a lot of the innovation in the delivery of feature sets into the OTT experience. And so right now there's a tremendous focus, right, on low latency. The reason people want low latency, right, is because they want to be able to do live sports betting, which is the new way to monetize your sports rights, coupled with like overlays, right, of multi-camera views, stat views and otherwise. And I think and then you have to, again, layer that over across the data, across different devices, right? What are the capabilities of that device to be able to deliver against those same experiences? So I actually think like the sports world is a fascinating place. At First Light, we're working with a partner to reinvent the kind of new sports experience. And it really is making sure where it's critically important for sports providers, especially at this moment, is to make sure they have a platform that can constantly deliver against new integrations with new feature sets because of the rapid innovation that's happening in that space.
And you mentioned feature sets, and you're mentioning rapid adoption and where this is going. Shabbat, on putting together Google TV, you're really looking at an overall device that would be able to reach all of this audiences, but you're also, have a relationship with Nielsen that would be able to serve this up from a data standpoint. Are you finding that has become very critically important to your overall product launch, as being able to correctly identify who the audience is, and then be able to work with your partners, if not your content, to serve it up to them, being very device centric?
Absolutely. I think we do partnerships, but also internally a lot of extensive user research. We always try to interview users in different family or personal settings, both within the US and across the globe. And we have a very data-centric view to coming up with conclusions based on what we are hearing from our users. Going back to your point about different devices and different patterns of consumption, we see variations across age-based demographics too, like TV versus the tablet versus mobile. So there are some devices that naturally satisfy the needs of maybe like the teenagers in the family, the younger kids in the family versus the older demographic. But in general, we do, as a platform, we are looking at both device specific and user specific. What does this user want to do with this device at this time of day? For example, in the morning, I'm more interested maybe in the news headlines. So I might want to bring some live TV news headlines, or I might give a commute projection, bring that information to the user. But in the evening, maybe I'm more interested in watching a longer video, and I'm interested in looking at movies and shows. I'm just giving an example. So we are very cognizant, and what devices I tend to use if I have a 1-hour commute in the train, like I did actually for a few years, I might be interested in watching a whole episode on the train with my earplugs, and I have done that, or listen to music, my playlist. But in the evening, I'm sitting in the living room, maybe with my entire family or my spouse, and maybe I'm more interested in movies that our age group tends to watch together.
Sure.
And on the weekend, maybe it's a fitness routine on Saturday. So we are very much cognizant of how do we look at data, but apply judgment and actual user interview feedback on top of it to bring the best. And we're also constantly letting the users show us what they tend to consume as well, because not every user is the same based on demographics either, or location. So there is a lot of nuanced variation across user behavior.
I think the nuancing of the programming is really critically important, and it's, for having Nielsen as well as multiple other kinds of analytic firms working to address this, as well as neural linguistics and all kinds of different ways to attach the viewer to the content, has become now norm. What you were looking at and mentioned was something we in the business have known for some time, as far as how to build and reach the audiences. Your Google TV, for example, and I know that's not a part of your group, but it learns the viewer's behavior. I've been hearing this from a number of different people that they're actually watching Google TV because once the algorithm is built up, they're getting programming that is interesting to them, which really kind of brings me back to Paul. Stroom is really smart, and he really didn't really give a specific of what Stroom is, but combined with First Light and Stroom, with the platform and the ability to work on many of the different types of distribution points and capabilities of what First Light does. But Stroom, is it a sampling environment more than it is an actual destination? Is it a place where you're looking at viewers potentially that don't have subscriptions to different types of services? We're at that point now, right? We're at a point where subscriber saturation is at a certain point, certain levels of social economic contact has been met. And we're starting to, like, as Bonnie pointed out, the undeveloped countries are starting to come into this, and they're wanting to be able to participate in this kind of programming as well. Is Stroom positioned at this time to be a potential sampling vehicle for these viewers to come in and with credits be able to go, you know what, I want to try Netflix. I want to try and see if that's something that is going to be beneficial to me, and I'll use a few of my credits. Is that where you're starting to see? Certainly from a long run, it's for a destination point. But at this time, are you starting to witness that a little bit?
Great question. So probably provide some context. I do want to go back to one last thing we were talking about in sports that I'll answer your question. I just want to also point out that I think we have to remember sports is also a multi-device experience a lot of times. So it's somebody watching the 10-foot on their mobile, often sometimes their computer, especially if they're like a super engaged fan, right? Whether or a bettor or otherwise. So all these different cohorts that you have to kind of think about in terms of the multi-device footprint. But getting back to your question, let me set some context, right? So our goal is to, essentially take everything outside of the big three or big five, right? And help provide a destination that helps partners that have unbelievable great content and really great brands get surfaced in a really easy way for consumers to discover and consume, right? So as we've been public with, right, you subscribe to Stroom, you receive with that monthly subscription, you receive a credit package, and that credit package allows you to use those credits across all of the member services to watch individual shows or programs or episodes or movies, right? Or live events, including a broad-based experience potentially, right? So we have those are the kind of components of how you experience it. And I will say that I believe that that environment alone will create a huge amount of both consumer value and economic value for our partners. On the consumer side, the reaggregation of that, the ability to look at the cross-hatching of data to be able to say what we can build as a greater recommendation engine, greater recommendations, right, and approaches, really was, in many respects, why Hulu was so successful. successful, right? When we put ABC onto the Hulu platform and back in 2009, 2010 broadcast season, our business on the ABC side continued to grow. But what was really interesting is that same year, we saw nearly 3x growth coming from that Hulu experience, just because there was so much more time spent and engagement spent on the platform. So we're similarly looking to find that opportunity for our partners. Now, outside of that experience, we do want to win that habit, right? We do want that habit formation. So if we become that place where people discover and learn about services and are consuming that content, and then we notice, hey, Alan, you're watching service X, right? Let's take Broadway HD as an example. You would be better served by actually having a subscription than using your credits against that. Then let's move you into a subscription managed within the environment so that we can maintain that habit, right? And keep that formation and keep that consumer engaged. And then over time, we could say, hey, by the way, Bonnie, we see you're doing some really great, you could fall into a cohort with other services, and we can look to kind of offer ways to grow the subscription and the stickiness of the product. But I do want to set expectations, right? We are pre-launch at this moment. We are just getting out of the gate. We'll start with our foundation around credits and move in that direction over time. But we're super excited, and I think that there's just so much opportunity to surface great content for our consumers through the aggregation of all of these partners.
You raise a really good point, and that is where we're at today is we have a lot of new people coming in, as what was alluded before, with grandma and grandpa and writers basically saying, with all the different members of the family and Bonnie, trying to use this device, and they're learning it, and they don't have I don't know how to have a smart TV. I'm not that smart, and so it comes down to these audiences are there. What you just described is, kind of a gating point of where over the course of the next 2 years, 3 years is how do we retain these audiences? How do these services keep these audiences, connected, and thus their service fees, their subscription fees, their whatever their model is built around, how do they stay connected so they can keep their businesses going? Is this something that you've drilled into a little bit, Shabana, when you were pulling together Google TV, is how to help your partners retain their audiences?
This is very critical for us to help solve, because the way we look at it is, what are the journeys the user is trying to accomplish during the day, and how best can we remove the barrier or friction in their completing their journey? And that can be play something for me on Hulu or play something for me on Disney Plus. That could be the journey, or they're trying to do something else. So what are they naturally trying to do, and how can we bring it to them as quickly as possible? I think to Paul's point about content aggregation, I think that is an important part of the evolution that we are seeing, that there are content aggregators and then there are content providers too. And we need to be able to bring the best content, most personalized to the users for either kind. And so how do we understand what the user may want to do right now and enable either Google Assistant or other ways, which are all integrated, by the way, with Google TV. So we work with our Google Search org to leverage some of the core recommendation infrastructure, but trying to tailor it to what users tend to do on devices, on the TV devices, and how can we bring the content that they want. Like we have discussed in this session, there are sports fans who probably watch less TV and shows than many of us too. They just want to consume sports and want to have sports related information all day. And in fact, anecdotally, my brother is one of them. So when I visit him in India for just a week, he would still be watching cricket news most of the day. And I'd be like, okay, I'm going to be leaving in 2 days. Do you want to spend some time with me too? And I'll have to take him out of the house, to have some quality time. So we need to really understand where the users are coming from, and then how do we support their persona, rather than assuming all of them want to consume the same kinds of media, and it's all about just modifying a few cards and rows here and there. It's got to be a lot more immersive, a lot more appealing, and a lot more personalized to different sets of user patterns. So that's a big mission of Google TV as a platform.
You raised a good point. Is the question I'd have for you for your brother, did he take his phone with him? Was he sneaking shots as he was walking along, still talking to you? You know, those kinds of things, you know, we have an addictive, you know, people have an addictive personalities, right? It's like they're going to be a part of that because they feel that they're going to miss something, which really brings me back to what you just said from a device standpoint to Reinhard. You know, are you finding that you're starting to receive a lot more enhanced interest from device makers to have a really efficient platform and a really efficient way to connect to any viewer with your technology, and especially with the codecs that you're building?
Yes, I would definitely say so. So also the device manufacturers, all kinds of devices actually, from smart TVs to mobiles to desktops, they obviously realized the potential of viewers, video streaming, and the growing video market, and they all find their business model to get their fair share of the cake. But that also means they invest more. They invest more in making the experience possible, and that's why they definitely search for partnerships and reach out also to companies like us to really work together. And that's what we see a lot also in standardization bodies and in industry forums to align our solutions. Because it's a game or a challenge which can only be solved together. There will not be no point solution which provides you a good quality of experience on all devices. It's always working with the device, with the player manufacturer, with the content provider, with the encoding vendor. So all of those companies and all of those parts play a critical role in the overall achievement in the end. And yeah, I can only second what Shivana mentioned earlier on knowing your users and knowing their behavior and what they do and when do they want to do what with their with the content that they have available. And that's also something that I see and I hear quite often. And I think some pain point where the industry needs to grow. To be more aware of what your users are doing, and if you know that, and if you are able to actually get behind the user journey, I think then you have a very powerful tool in hand.
Well, you know, what I've been hearing and what I'd like to do is in the remaining minutes before we kind of wrap this all up, what I'm hearing is it's critical to have efficient devices. First of all, you have to connect it. We have a connected world and society that wants to be able to find what they want to watch when they want to watch it. Now, you know, those of us that have been in the game for a while, that used to be called TV Anywhere, you know, and that was, you know, a number of years ago. But in the last 11 months, it has been validated. So now what you just said is that the television, the device manufacturers, the carrier, everyone is looking at new types of devices. We're looking at the need for that. Then we're looking for the content that's available to help provide and retain audiences, like, for example, the Fire Sticks, or with Roku. You know, Roku has 50 million you know, users right now. And in the course of that, you know, they just bought Quibi's content of 75. So they're evolving, they're growing, they're becoming an aggregation portal as well. But again, they've got a great audience that they can be able to tap. So there's the audience. This is a combination of a device with that in complement to Disney or in complement to what was Strum. We've got the need for niche programming to drive audiences. So that's starting to really grab hold because of the, again, the risk of being redundant. It's been discovered over the course of the last 11 months. People are now taking that chance, taking that risk. And then we're watching the success of a tremendous brand with Disney being able to provide an overall content offering for a fair price. And this brings me then to Google, you know, and being able to reach a broad audience to be able to capture that at a fair price for their partnerships. So I'm seeing some things wrap up here that the audiences, the industry really is starting to grab hold of. And that is, in the course of the next 12 months, 18 months, we're going to start seeing the Portal's becoming a little bit more of a super aggregation environment to offer a better value, a better service. You probably may have saw in the news today where the BBC is coming into the US, with Prime, and offering their entire catalog, including documentaries and specials for $5 a month. So we're seeing this take place with tremendous content, broad reach, efficient delivery, and recognition of who the audience is. We weren't there a year ago. Now we are. So that is going to be feeding us up to what the next 2 years are. But before I want to get into that and close it up, and this is just a summation of what I've heard. Eric, you said that you've got some really good questions that have come in from the audience. Can you help out on this?
I sure can. Yeah, we've got a number of questions here from the audience, some of which I think are probably too specific to individual panelists or are asking the kinds of questions that, in my experience, panelists, especially those who work for large publicly traded companies, can't answer on panels like this. But I really like a couple of questions here regarding cinemas. And, we all know that cinema business has gone almost non-existent in the last 12 months. Do our speakers see the cinema business rebounding, and how is that going to affect what you do from each of your perspectives?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, Grant, Disney, ESPN, Hulu Plus. Obviously, there have been films that Disney has premiered online and in the cinemas at the same time. And Bonnie, we'd also, the audience member would also like you to discuss what sort of ally you might see in cinema chains for Broadway HD. But Grant, why don't you go ahead first?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, in my opinion, theatrical will rebound and will take its place back as a first window for major releases of features, and that will cause some rebalancing and adjusting for these large platforms like Disney Plus to figure out when titles like that will then move to live on those platforms for the rest of their exhibition lives. It'll be, it's going to be touch and go, I think, to see, when the right time is to do that. We're already seeing in China, for example, that, the screens are back and they're reporting, tremendous, revenues in that regard. So I think it's going to happen. It may happen sooner than later, which would be fantastic. And then you'll see some windows begin to adjust as to when things go and when things don't. There's a lot of necessitated experimentation that's gone on to figure out what's the right thing to go. You'll see Raya the Last Warrior go on straight to Disney Plus soon at no fee, but previously, there was a fee, for prior releases. So that's just going to happen. I think as we go forward, but as long as we're at Disney Plus, we are at just a huge fight, not only to retain consumers, but with our competitors to just deliver content and get talent on board and in front of cameras. We still got to get cameras rolling. We're still having trouble with pauses in production and stuff like that. And those are our near-term challenges.
Yeah, but if I jump in on a little bit on this, on near-term challenges, there's a lot of great productions that are in play right now. They've had to just enter into their budgets the cost for COVID. Yellowstone, has moved their entire production group up to, Livingston, Montana, including the stars, to be in their own bubble, which was a costly endeavor, but they're creating and they're producing. New productions are happening over in Europe because of costs and a little bit more openness, Canada, certain levels. So I hear what you're saying, but you raise a really interesting point and just don't want to let it go by. Do you think that the larger chains, like they're doing in China, are looking to maybe extend their brands to OTT streaming services? In other words, the AMC brand, to be able to have that kind of relationship with the consumer, versus to enhance it. If you missed it at the theater, you can now have it within our direct-to-consumer play. Have you heard and seen any of those from any of the readings that you've been doing? Because I know you can't speak for Disney. I want you.
I haven't. I'm not sure that a lot of content providers are going to be willing to part with rights in that way. They're going to reserve those. I think they're going to reserve those windows for themselves. So I haven't seen that happen.
Okay, good enough. Eric, did you have another question you want to jump into?
Well, I'd like to make sure Bonnie in particular, but any of the other panelists also have a chance to respond to the question about cinemas.
Fair enough.
Sure. I do see cinemas returning. I do see, especially for theatrical content, that people like that shared experience, even with people that they don't know. We all love to watch the big screen TV with family, but there is something very magical about sharing an experience with a large audience. They've actually done studies about, in the theaters that people's heartbeats, sync at certain times, which I don't know if that's just, myth but I like it. But I do think that with that, and especially at the start, that you're going to see, sort of the blockbuster type thing, which then increases the price. And part of what our mission at Broadway HD has always been is accessibility. So the tickets for a Broadway show in January, February of 2020 were $125 for a single ticket. And our subscription is like everybody else, it's $100 a year. To watch everything. So that idea of democratizing this very elite art form has always been part of our DNA, but we need to be a sustainable business so that, if the cinemas are open and we do have that big, event cinema piece, which we're always looking for, because everybody is that we will pull it out and put it in the cinema as a first window, because Broadway HD is basically, it's kind of the long tail for where these things will land. Disney Plus with their, Hamilton early release, which was amazing, and Netflix got, Springsteen. So they're looking for those, they're looking for the Super Bowl, and they're looking for the ones that, even if you're not a sports fan, even if you're not a football fan, on, Super Bowl day, we're all sports fans. And I think that, those are the types of, pieces that are pulled out for the event cinema and for the ones that Disney Plus and, people go after with like bigger, bigger event, bigger price tags for those. But the stuff that is for, the season ticket buyer for sports and for, for theater, you're going to land on Broadway HD and, be perfectly happy till the bigger thing gets there. So I do see it, changing the price point, which is part of what we're going to live with after COVID, I think.
And I think that's a really good point of changing the price point for the theaters. And, I don't know what my son would do, I do know what he's done because there hasn't been theaters or cinemas for his first dates. I mean, let's face it, it's a rite of passage to ask someone to go to the date to go to a movie. So in that, we're at a really good point right now to wrap this up. Does anyone else have anything to make comment, Reiner? Shabana, any other things to really wrap this up from your perspective?
I would love to just jump in one more time, because I think that we've spoken about content and about delivery and the technology and the different, well, we spoke about it in terms of genres, but if you want to talk about what the future has, especially for content like the theatrical Broadway HD content, it's the shorter form, because we have always had, it's not cut up. It's just like you would see it in a theater in Broadway. Is this 2-hour content? It's not binging type content. It's just very thoughtful, sit down. I'm going to spend 2 hours with this theater piece. And I think now what we're looking at is things that, hey, some short form stuff is coming in here. So I really do think that, the younger subscribers are used to short form content, whereas that doesn't work in the theater. You're not going to charge $125 for a 15-minute play.
Yeah,
so
sure.
It doesn't work, but online it can work as part of an SVOD service.
Absolutely, it can work, and that's the success of series from coming off of movies. The young adults being from 18 to 30 that are really moving to IP delivery of sports. All of this is, snackable or shorter versions of forms of content. Eric, I really appreciate our panel for being able to make the time to join us today. Thank you. For me, Alan McLennan, I thank you, Eric. It's been a great morning.
I thank you very much as well, Alan. You've done a terrific job of steering the discussion. Thanks to our panelists for your insights. It's always great when we've got such a diverse group of perspectives to bring to a topic like this one. And I'd like to thank Limelight Networks once again for sponsoring the whole week. And of course, thank BitMovin for sponsoring this panel. And thank everyone who's joined us all week at our panels and presentations here at Streaming Media Connect. We'll be having another Streaming Media Connect virtual event in May, Streaming Media East Connect, with even more panels and presentations. And remember, we have workshops coming up next week if you are interested in those as well. So that's it for me signing off. Thanks again, everyone.